Hey, Fight fans, what's going on? I just wanted to post this particular fan catcher topic. I think the UFC needs MMA needs another dominant organization to rival the UFC for MMA to become successful and more in the future and flourish. And this particular fan caster was actually inspired by Humble King's fan caster who cuts UFC fighters anyway. And it looks like Humble King 718 is very passionate about why these fighters are getting cut, and he was actually a little pissed off at some of the things that's going on. And this is my point. I think what's happening with the UFC, with MMA right now, is that most North Americans, for the most part, and let's face it, North America is the biggest market out there for any sport, let alone simply MMA. But most North Americans think that mixed martial arts is the UFC, and UFC is mixed martial arts, and that's not the case. UFC is MMA, but MMA isn't UFC. Strikeforce was one. You got Affliction was another. You got Bodog. A lot of fight leagues that bordered on MMA wasn't very successful, and that's why North Americans think that UFC embodies the whole sport of MMA. I mean, that's not true. For what's happening right now is that the sport of mixed martial arts is congruent to the growth of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which really is run by one person. And this one person has too much overall say in what happens to a sport. He recently cut Talos Ladies. He had a pretty boring fight. He was actually booed on his last fight, and they cut him. Now, the reason why Talos Ladies cut, if you ask Dana White, was the fact that, I don't think he was entertaining the fans, etc., etc. But it could also be been contractual things. Maybe Talos Ladies said, listen, I'm not going to fight for $3,000 and not risk my life for $5,000. And Dana White said, well, you know what? If you don't fight here, then you don't fight anywhere else. You release the guy. What's happening is that you need competition. You need competition to keep guys like Dana White honest. You need just like Windows needed Linux, just like every monopoly needs somebody to balance it out. You need a competitive organization to be able to take guys that UFC does not take. I know there's some out there, but in North America especially, there's no other game but the UFC. And I think for the sport of MMA to grow and to flourish, you need something else than one man controlling the entire sport. Because in the end, the sport will mirror what Dana White thinks is the best. And who knows if what Dana White thinks is the best is actually for the best of mixed martial arts. Maybe for the UFC, but definitely not for mixed martial arts. And that is one of the reasons why I think Fedor Emelianenko not signing with UFC is a great thing. And that is, I think, the reason why Fedor didn't sign with UFC, because he didn't want to be under the control of such an egomaniacal dictator such as Dana White. People say that Fedor did this because he's afraid of competition. People say that Fedor did this because he wants to keep his number one overall ranking. Well, consider this. What if Fedor did this because Dana White was an egomaniacal, complete a-hole, and he didn't want to work for a man of that and under those working conditions? Money isn't everything. Fedor Emelianenko is a rich man. He doesn't need the money as much as he needs autonomy, and he needs control over his own brand. That's why, in my opinion, I think more fighters and more organizations should spring up to challenge the dominance of the UFC in North America.